Originally, Sally Newkirk was going to be here to honor Ron, and I have the wonderful task of filling in for her, and so I'm honored to read this for Ron Stiller from Sally. Dear friends, I have been looking forward to this program to recognize the impact Ron Stiller has had on our community, and I am sorry that illness prevents me from being with you tonight. I want to thank Laura Wilkins for stepping in for me, and I know you will enjoy hearing her lovely voice. That's lovely of her. As she shares my thoughts about the long-term relationship and bond of friendship that exists between everyone at the Carnegie Center and Ron Stiller. I met Ron in the early 1990s when I was applying for a conservation assessment grant for what was then called the Floyd County Museum. The grant had two parts. The first part would fund a conservator to access all aspects of the museum's collection management policies and procedures, and the museum would receive recommendations for this position. The second part would fund an architect with historic preservation credentials and one we would choose from our community. This was the easiest part of the grant for me to do because Ron Stiller was recognized as the best person to do this work by every architect I asked. We met, Ron was interested in the project, presented his credentials to the granting agency, was approved, and the research began. The assessments and final reporting took over a year to complete. And I have seen that binder. It is here. I have seen it. Ron presented to the board of directors a very detailed assessment of the state of the structure that included a prioritized list of the work that needed to be done, along with rough cost estimates. The final tab came to over $900,000. Now, we knew what needed to be done, but we had no funding. Our staff, which at the time was Sue Ellen Wilkinson and myself, began to plan for a capital campaign. And then something extraordinary happened. I had a meeting at the library with Stephen Day, the library director, and my boss. I was waiting for him in a room that I noticed had a number of lovely renderings taped to the walls of various areas in the library. I asked him what they were, and he said that since the library was nearly 40 years old, these were part of a plan for a bond issue to bring the building up to current standards. I gasped and she said, "I'll be right back." I ran to the museum, grabbed Ron's final report, ran back to the library, and showed it to Steve. The library's planning for the bond issue was well underway with upcoming deadlines, but he said that, with Ron's detailed report, our project could be included with the libraries. There were many hurdles to overcome and countless meetings, but the library received approval for both projects from the state. Work began in 1998 and was completed in 1999. When the museum reopened to the public with a new name, the Carnegie Center for Art and History. At this point, I also want to recognize all of the countless hours that Stephen Day spent on our behalf in managing the bond issue, and I know Ron feels the same. The impact of the completion of the renovation cannot be overstated, both in terms of the effect it had on our operation, but as importantly, because it was also the beginning of a relationship with Ron Stiller that continues today. Ron has served faithfully as the Carnegie's building advisor, while alternating terms on the Carnegie Center Inc. Board of Directors since 2001, and serving multiple terms as president. Despite his busy schedule, he was always available when we needed him, and I don't remember him ever saying no to any request. He and Ann have been loyal and generous contributors to the Carnegie, and I hardly have adequate words to thank him for the many ways in which he has improved and enriched our community through his work on our building and so many others. Ron, you might not have known what you were getting into all those years ago, but I know that I speak for all of us when I say Thank you for your professionalism, your leadership, and your friendship. It has been an honor to work with you. Thank you, Ron.
Okay, let me get this. I'll just have to come back, I guess. Hang on.
Now we're from our sponsor.
Hang on, I'm not sure why this is not working. Here we go. Okay, sorry about that. I guess I was to introduce myself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Vic already did introduce you. I'm so sorry. This is Steve Weiser. He is the president of the Louisville Historical League, and he is going to be gracing us with some words about Ron Stiller. Sorry about that.
Just say Ron.
Okay. Just Ron.
Okay, I've been tasked with talking about Ron Stiller, the early years. My glasses out here so I can read properly. Ron and I worked together many moons ago. I won't say how long ago that was, and I have kept up with Ron over the past century or so. Did I say century? I mean decades. So here are a few things from Ron's early career that my senior memory can still recall. Oops. That's a bit too early. Sorry about that, Ron. Not sure where that photo came from. But Ron has been practicing architecture a long time. How long do you say? Well, archaeologists recently uncovered this painting in Egypt of Ron supervising construction of the pyramids. And I know most of you think Frank Lloyd Wright was the inspiration for Ayn Rand's famous novel, The Fountainhead, but actually it was Ron. Ron, though, did learn his architectural skills from the master. Ron's first project, however, did have a few technical issues. And his second project did look a bit like his architectural mentor's masterpiece. But really, Ron, flushing water? His first attempt at historic preservation didn't quite impress his clients. But once Ron got established, though, he did some phenomenal projects. In 1989, Ron won an American Institute of Architects Design Award in Louisville for the Fraser Rehab Aquatic Therapy Center. Did I mention Ron has been around a long time? Well, this project has since been most architectural projects last at least 50 years. So Ron has outlived his architectural award-winning design. Most don't know that Ron was a fabulous tennis player. This led to another one of his architectural achievements. The University of Louisville's Bass Rudd Tennis Center is one of the finest in the country, and Ron was the designer. Thousands view it each day as they drive by on I-65. So it's probably one of your most viewed projects, Ron. Following his distinguished work in Louisville, Ron went from the dark side to the sunny side. In Jeffersonville, Ron designed the landmark residential complex known as the Harbors. Here are a few some of his early concepts and a resident who loved living there. I don't think she lives there anymore. All of the units have a nice view of the Ohio River, and this is a phenomenal location to watch thunder. I remember when it was being built, we had a meeting, not so much a meeting, but a viewing party over there for thunder as it was being constructed. Ron and Brownie Day Mullins Deerdorf of the firm that he once worked with, and I worked as well on that. But it's just a great location, and all the different balconies that you have there are a view of the Ohio River. One of the key design features of the harbors was these lower units at the base, which helped transition this tall tower to the smaller scale of the nearby houses and buildings. So Ron changed the design at the base so that it, obviously as you're driving by, you think they're just townhouses, you don't realize that it's this huge multi-story building. So that's one of Ron's clever ways of masking this tall building there along the Ohio. And in 1991, Ron was the primary master planner for the Clarksville riverfront between the Kennedy and Clark bridges. And this was Ron's design for that. Here it was, so that was 1991, and in 1992 it was actually under construction. Unlike most projects today that take years to implement, this turned around fairly quickly. So this was Ron's master plan, and it illustrates the various features that he was proposing to be housed there between the two bridges, the Clark Bridge on the left, Kennedy there on the right. So you kind of see what was being proposed. And then this is an actual aerial view, Google Earth sort of thing, that talks about what actually is there. And really the only two things that changed from his master plan to reality was the location of the visitor center. Ron had it down closer to the waterfront, but here it got moved farther north. And then there is no marina. And I just blame the Corps of Engineers for that situation. I understand the Corps had something to do with it not being implemented in the marina, but I wish the marina was there. Well, that concludes Ron's early years. From supervising pyramid construction, to being inspiration for a famous novel, to now being a Southern Indiana legend, we're all very grateful for Ron making our community a better place in which to live. Thank you, Ron, for being such a great architect and a great friend to all of us.
Right here.
Unfortunately, I think I closed it out on you there, so there you go. Without further ado, Sekula. I think everyone's familiar with Greg.
Thank you, Steve. Well, as many of you know, Indiana Landmarks is a statewide nonprofit historic preservation organization, and as has been mentioned, our office, which consists of myself and my colleague Laura Renwick, who's sitting there in the back, we cover a 14-county area in south central Indiana. And I would reiterate the theme that Sally Newkirk stated, in that Ron never says no. Because when either Laura or I call Ron and say, Ron, we need your help, he has always been willing to say yes. So he has definitely been an advocate and a friend and a partner in our efforts to save and preserve historic properties throughout southern Indiana. So what I'd like to do today is just kind of bombard you with a selective group of some of the projects that we have worked with Ron on over the years that have shown kind of the breadth of his interest and his commitment to historic preservation here in Indiana. So one of the things that our organization does rather frequently is provide grants to nonprofit organizations to do studies of historic buildings. And the number of studies on our shelf that are connected to Ron Stiller and his wife Ann are numerous, and here are just a few of the studies, and I'll talk a little bit about a couple of these, but these are normally reports that nonprofits will do as kind of the first step of preservation. What does a building need? What is it going to cost to rehabilitate it? How feasible is the rehabilitation? What are some of the incentives that are available that could help with a project? And Ron will delve into those in a report that is provided to the group that is undertaking the study. And these are just a couple of the studies that he's done over the years, and they've ranged, as I said, from local projects here in New Albany to small remote towns like Rome, Indiana, which has one of the oldest extant courthouses standing in the state. So he has worked for Main Street groups, for nonprofit preservation organizations, for local governments, all under the auspices of Indiana Landmarks in our grant program. Some of the earliest projects he did, I'm going to touch upon, and one of the earliest being, of course, the restoration of Division Street School. I think we're all locally familiar with this building, and several of you in this room were very involved early on. Vic McGinnity, Dan Peters, and others who helped after Catherine Hickerson got word that the school corporation was contemplating the demolition of this building, and reached out to Vic and others. They turned to Ron Stiller to help once they got the green light to look at the possibility of saving and reusing this historic building. So as many of you know, it was used, I think, by the school corporation as sort of their machine shop, wood shop for years. And the school corporation was going to demolish the building. And ultimately, an effort was mounted to look at a restoration of the building with the idea of including it in the curriculum of the school corporation for heritage education, learning about the role of African Americans' contributions to our educational system here locally. And Ron was hired to do the overall restoration plan for this building. So here's an early drawing. Here's a group of the early folks who were involved, many of whom are still with us today, some of whom, as I said, are in this room as well. But it was a very lengthy project, but one that continues to serve Floyd County students today. And I know some of you, including Ron, my colleague Laura, Pam, Vic, others are still actively involved and on the board of this effort to keep this important landmark in New Albany standing and flourishing as an educational outreach for students in New Albany and Floyd County. We've got some interior photos as well. Of course, hallowed ground in New Albany is the Scribner House, and Ron wouldn't be Ron if Ron weren't involved in somehow the efforts to save and preserve this building. And as many of you know, the DAR has been a careful steward of this historic building. And several years ago now, there was a need to do a fairly significant facelift for the Scribner House. It involved framing, timber framing, the sill replacement, the rear porches were beginning to kind of fall off the building. And Ron worked with the DAR. We helped a little bit with some grant funding and other sources. Blue Caesars Foundation at the time, or Horseshoe, maybe it was Horseshoe at the time, assisted in a major way with that restoration effort. But Ron provided the needed guidance to help put our earliest landmark here in New Albany back together. In nearby Georgetown, several years ago, Laura and I got some frantic calls from residents in Georgetown who said, we're really concerned because the town has moved the town hall out of the old Georgetown State Bank building, and there's talk about demolishing the building. So it began a grassroots effort to try to convince town officials to save the building. There were campaigns with folks riding cars around town. There were Destination Georgetown kind of emerged from that effort. But the building was in pretty rough shape, and the town clearly couldn't occupy the building any longer in its current state. When they moved across the street with a lot of pressure and, as I said, grassroots advocacy, we convinced the town that the building should remain. And Ron provided needed help throughout the process as we worked with the town through primarily Laura's leadership to secure some state grants to help with exterior restoration of the building. And today, this is what the exterior looks like. The town is now committed to leasing the building. There's actually an effort underway to get I think they're still looking at kind of a meat market deli in the building. They've had a few little hurdles to jump through, but It's really launched an awareness, an awakening of preservation in Georgetown, which led further to creation of a National Register Historic District along State Route 64, and also efforts to look down the block at one of the oldest extant buildings in Floyd County and in Georgetown, and that's the Wolf Hotel. Just a couple years ago, Ron provided assistance through a grant to Destination Georgetown to kind of do a study of this building, to look at its needs and what potential uses could occur in this structure. The town is presently in the process of trying to gain control of the building. They're going through an appraisal process right now with the hope of securing ownership so that the future of this building will be in good hands and it will contribute to the vitality of Georgetown. Some of you may recall just about a year ago, we saved and moved the historic Smith farmhouse on Charlestown Road. This was an advocacy effort that was led by Indiana Landmarks along with a lot of folks in the community. We convinced a developer who had purchased the property from Northside Christian Church with their plans to demolish the building for commercial development, that we wanted to see the building saved. And after failing to convince the developer to reuse the building for adaptive reuse for commercial purposes, people crowded into planning and zoning meetings, and as a result, the city's Plan Commission and Board of Zoning Review basically denied the project, which brought Hogan Development, the real estate developer, to the table. They subsequently agreed to relocate the house at their cost to a piece of land that they would purchase and then donate that land with the house on it to Indiana Landmarks. We currently have the property for sale, but Ron here too has been an instrumental part of that effort in that he has helped us develop some conceptual plans that show how an addition could be added to the back so that the property could be adaptively reused for commercial purposes. So someone, for example, wants to put a restaurant in the back and put an addition on with a kitchen and seating area. We've got some concept plans and some site plans that have been developed for that, and Ron assisted us with that effort. Perhaps one of the most grateful projects for which I owe Ron a debt of gratitude is a project that is near and dear to me, and that is the restoration of the Coons Hartman House, which is now the office of Indiana Landmarks, the Southern Region. As you know, in January of 2021, I think, where there was a fire that swept through the property in the early morning hours, and the fate of the building was very much in question. I remember receiving a phone call early in the morning from my good friend David Barksdale saying, "Hey, do you know the Beatty Funeral Home building burned?" And I showed up on the site, and the owners were there with their insurance company, and I gave my card and said, "If there's anything we can do to help, let me know." Little did I know that we would be the ones to save this building from demolition after the owners began to have conversations about just leveling the structure and turning it into a parking lot or grass lot and selling it for commercial development. So over the course of about 20 months, after much effort at early planning, Ron helped guide us in the restoration of the building, and would meet me at any time of the day to talk about things, and just kind of to stress what Sally said, and that is Ron has never said no to us when we have asked him to help. It's always, okay, yeah, what can I do to help? I mean, I know he's crazy busy. I know he's trying to retire a bit, but he has just, his generosity of spirit in terms of helping has just, it's beyond words. And I think our project shows the fruits of his guidance in this effort. I couldn't do what I do, Laura couldn't do what she does without people like Ron Stiller helping us along the way. So here are just some of our before and after images of the office. I think many of you have been there. If you haven't, stop by sometime and take a look. It's a pleasure to come to work there every day. So that wasn't our first rodeo with Ron regarding offices, however. Back in 2004, I actually started with Landmarks in April of 2002. But in 2003, I was sitting there writing processing an invoice for the mowing of a vacant lot next to our office, which at the time was in the historic 1837 Grissomore House, which is the brick double house down on Chestnut Street, where our office had been for close to, at that time, maybe 20 years or so. And anyway, Clark Memorial Hospital announced it was doing some emergency room expansion, and as part of that, two houses that were up on the hill by the emergency room were scheduled for demolition, one of which was this house called the Willie Allhands House. And I think that was one of my first really engaged projects with Ron. Reached out to Ron and said, hey Ron, I've got this idea, and that is, what if we were to take that two-story frame house up there by Clark Memorial Hospital, move it down on that vacant lot that I'm paying someone to mow through the growing season every 2 weeks, and what if we were to repopulate it with a historic house and move our office to that property? And he's like, yeah, that looks great. I think that's a great idea. So Ron did the architectural work for that, designed the foundation, helped us with all of the code issues to convert this residential property into our offices. And so this is moving day in 2003 when they moved it 8 blocks down Spring Street. I remember getting up at like 5:30 in the morning when they started the move down the hill from the hospital. And as you know, the hospital is kind of up high in relationship to the rest of the city. So I'm standing on Spring Street at like 6 in the morning and I'm looking down towards downtown and all I can see are flashing lights from utility companies. I'm like, oh, that's where the $40,000 utility bill is going. But it was the timing was right. We had to actually, the public works crews at the city of Jeffersonville actually bent physically with their hands some of the small tree saplings on Spring Street to allow the house to get through. It was that tight. Now they couldn't have done that. They would have had to have cut down all of the trees. But at the time, the trees were young enough where we could actually bend them. But this is it moving down Spring Street. This is the building shortly after we restored it as our offices. This is the interior as we had it set up when it was our office. Today, it is, as you know, the Union Restaurant and game yard. Ron's involvement with this property continued after we left. We sold the building with preservation covenants. So the house itself is relatively intact with the exception of one small opening in the back of the building where there is now a doorway that leads you down into the new addition, which is here, which Ron also designed. They wanted a fairly big addition. I was a little skittish about it originally, but Ron was very, careful in making sure that the building could easily be taken off and removed without damaging the original structure. And that is what ended up happening with that project. This is the game yard now, and what was a parking lot is now this fairly engaged urban space where people are gathering to drink and socialize and play games, and I think it's been a very successful way of kind of engaging the street. My office is now a bar. You can see it's the upper right. Laura's office is a nice little gathering space too, but they were very good about keeping the integrity of the building in terms of woodwork, mantles, staircase, things that we have protected in perpetuity as this building sees this new chapter in its life. Ron's helped with the Pageant Museum. He's been a very instrumental partner in terms of helping with some of the structural work that needed to be done on the interior, some of the grant funding that was helped with the exterior chimney work, some of the masonry work. He helped envision how to kind of reorganize the interior of the building, and he and I kind of came up together, I recall, with this idea of creating kind of a faux double-tiered porch in the back, which had been enclosed previously, but was just a kind of a blank wall. And he put the drawings together to create that, and I think it's been a very successful project for the museum. He also shared the love and went over to Jeffersonville to help the Clark County Museum, and has been actively involved with that project. A little bit more of a complex rehab. The Clark County Museum was given via a long-term lease this former garage auto repair shop in Jeffersonville in the Arts District, and Ron helped envision how that building could be kind of transformed into the Clark County Museum. Ron has also been assisting with efforts to restore the Howard House, the Thomas Howard House, which is located next door. That will be actually a part of the museum eventually as we continue to raise money and do work on this structure to expand the museum's exhibition space and collections. This is a very fascinating building, and I know he and I and John Hawkins, another architect locally, have studied it. It was a building that puzzled me initially, and it just like, what is going on with that building? And just to digress for a minute, but this is presently the Michigan Street facade of the building with the entrance here. And then you see this little peculiar building here, which we believe was built as a summer kitchen. And you might say, well, wasn't the summer kitchen usually behind the building as opposed to the side of the building? Well, and the answer is yes, it was. And originally, this was the side of the building. You can't easily see it, but right here you'll see a seam that goes all the way down the building. What we believe, based on the research that we've done and the kind of the archaeology of the building, is that originally this was an open area, double-tiered porch within this gable. The gable probably had a little bit of a modification with remodeling, but this would have been the side, and you would have seen the double-tiered porches here. There's actually interior doors in this room and the adjoining room that had transoms with doors. So kind of two doors, one in each room that opened onto the double-tiered porch. Second floor, the same thing, doors with transoms that go out into the porch. They had made these into hallways when they remodeled and converted the building. They also expanded onto the back. But this was a little dog trot that connected the summer kitchen to the main building. And so it would have been in the back of the house. And it's possible that, you know, these folks owned land, possibly even all the way to the Ohio River when this building was built, or at least significantly further than we see today. So a very interesting building, and one that Ron is continuing to provide some guidance on. In Jeffersonville, we also reached out to Ron in a partnership project that we did with Jeffersonville Main Street to save several historic houses that were located in the path of the new park that was built there at the foot of the Big Four Bridge. And so all of these houses were endangered and would have been demolished, and we sort of concocted this far-flung plan of moving them all, but we had to find a location. Luckily, working with Jeffersonville Main Street and a local bank, they were able to secure ownership of this vacant lot on Pearl Street, Pearl and what is that? Is that Market? Maple. And anyway, the plan was to then move all of these houses, which we oversaw. Here is sort of a musical chair version as they were all being lifted off their foundation. Ron did all of the architectural work, from doing the site plan to laying out the foundations for each of the buildings, helping with kind of the code issues with one of the houses that became the Main Street office, helping deal with some structural issues on several of the buildings. It was a lengthy process. Here's moving day. And then, as you know, today this block is a very thriving block in downtown Jeffersonville with several businesses there and the offices of Jeffersonville Main Street. Back early on, an early project I worked on, kind of beyond our local neck of the woods in the historic town of Hamilton in Perry County. Ron assisted with a restoration project on one of the earliest Hamilton stone houses in Hamilton. This building, as you can see on the left, was heading out pretty quickly. No roof, the interior was collapsing, and he helped guide a Division of Historic Preservation and Archaeology grant for that. And you can see the end result with the building after restoration and the cleaning of the sandstone. He's helped us in Bedford on a building that we received as a donation from the city of Bedford. This building was condemned, the city was contemplating demolition, and the back wall was about to collapse. And Ron came in, helped us along with some structural engineering from Renaissance Design Build, and we worked on a cleanup and a reconstruction of the rear of the building, did some interior shoring, new roof on the building, and put that wall back together so it was nice and sound. I'm happy to report with this, Ron, you don't even know this, but just this last week, the historic Elks building, which was a former Indiana Landmarks 10 Most Endangered property, went up for auction. And a developer from California who has ties to Indiana and Bedford was the high bidder on that building. Well, he also now has under contract our building and is going to couple the two together for a housing project in Bedford. So we have just signed a letter of intent with him, and so this building hopefully will be seeing a positive future. I'm going to close with just one building that I think is one that I know Ron put a lot of sweat and tears in, and Ann as well. And that's the historic Joe Jackson Hotel in the little town of Bologna. How many of you have been to Bologna? Okay, well, more than I thought. Bologna is in Jackson County. How many know where Bologna is? Okay, well, if you're traveling up 135.
Is that where the brick hills are?
That's Medora, but close by, close by. But this is the Joe Jackson Hotel, which is the last extant brick hotel building in Jackson County. And we had a group of people who were dedicated to saving this building despite all the odds. The building literally, the roof of the building had collapsed, the walls were starting to kind of push out, and they called us and said, "Oh, can you help us?" And we're like, we got to call Ron Stiller. and Ron, the main person behind this, a woman named Sally, was determined to save this building, and she was a steel magnolia if there ever was one. And Sally, met with Ron, and by the end of it, Ron and Ann were committed. They're like, we're going to help her save this building. So over the course of several years, lots of fish fries and fruit baskets and grants from the state, they have gotten this building back together and rebuilt the interior, and this is what it looks like today. I think is there now a current use in a part of the building, or at least there was an effort underway most recently to do kind of a portion of the building to make it occupiable. The group is still working on it. Sadly, Sally passed away before she could see this happen, but Ron has continued to work with the group, and I'm sure we'll continue to do so when they make a call again and ask us to assist. So this is my last slide. I think it gives you a sense of the kind of the breadth and depth of this man's and his wife's ability to help and make an impact on historic preservation, for which I know Laura and I are eternally grateful for his work. So thank you, everyone, and let's give a round of applause. Ron gets the last word, so I'm going to let him come up here and maybe just say a few words.
Thank you, Greg. I don't know how I go past that. I mean, Steve? Well, first, let me say thank you to Steve, Greg, Laura, Sally, Laura sitting in the back with Jim, as well as everyone else. I see a lot of past clients and maybe some future. And,
You're retiring, right?
yeah. Well, first thing I have to say is that the biggest thank you goes out to my wife, Trudeau. I mean, you know, when I don't say no, I hear about it. Nicely, but I hear about it. The second is that, Greg, I mean, you know, you have made me sound like I've done all of this by myself. I mean, the first thing you have to say is that I'm part of the team on a lot of these projects, if not all of them. And a lot of this credit goes to a lot of other people as well. It goes to not only Greg and Laura, but it also goes to the contractors who are involved. It goes to all of the people like Sally Newkirk, all these committees, and all these groups that had the foresight and the courage to go out and look to try to save the building, something that had character, but also had a lot to do with their life in this town or this city. And, you know, for me, when I was working in a firm with Steve Weiser, it was great, enjoyed that. But I have to say that when I went to work for myself, it was a far greater pleasure to be able to get out there and meet so many great people. I mean, over the course of 30 plus years, I've had the pleasure to meet so many great clients. A lot of them I'm still working with today, and I'm not really sure what else to say about some of that because it's just been amazing. I mean, I've been extremely lucky. I intend to continue to be extremely lucky, but it has been, how should I say, it's been a pleasure for my friend. You know, it's kind of like the cobbler that hasn't been able to take care of the shoes for his kids because he's always busy making things for the other people. That's kind of the way my house is right now. It needs a little bit of TLC, but we'll get there. I don't know where to begin. I've got a couple of things I'll add. There are a few footnotes I'd like to add to what Laura was saying about Sally. Well, first, the group that Sally got me involved with Heritage Preservation. This was the first time I'd worked with this organization out of Washington, D.C. And from that point on, I was able to work with them. I'm still being called by others to do assessments on museums. We just haven't really been able to get to a location. One was in Michigan. I really didn't want to go there. But I've done about 14 or 15 of these over the course of since about 94. Actually, in 19, we did a reassessment of this building, and that was paid for again by Heritage Preservation. So with Sally's help, I was able to take another avenue in my professional career and really make it into something that was really extremely, to me, important, very valuable. You know, and I've worked with, I see a couple of people here that I've done assessments for them on some of their buildings. So that's number one. The second one related to this building, and you know, I really thought that as I started to work for myself, it was going to be just a breeze, no problem whatsoever. I didn't realize that I was going to have to change my job description to a counselor to try to break up a fist fight on the front floor of this building in I think it was 1999, right before, maybe about 6 months before it opened. Sally and I are there standing watching the site superintendent and one of the subcontractors go at it. And she's looking at me like, what am I going to do? I said, let him go. Let's see where this takes us, okay? So I decided after that point, I'm not getting into the middle of some of these discussions. So, you know, little details like that. And then as I advanced, if you want to call it that, in my career and had a chance to meet Greg, the other two words coming out of his mouth was, let's move a building. I mean, you know, we moved, I don't know how many, including Rita Fleming's office. And, you know, with that came all the other fun, trying to make these buildings work. And I do remember being out on site. I didn't always do this, but I was there with a foundation contractor that I knew. His name's Bob Sprigler. helping Bob lay this site out, where these buildings were gonna go, and he looks at me and says, I've never met an architect that would ever do anything like this. Bob, you know, you don't live too far from me, I just wanted to be a good person and help. So all along the way, it's been, you know, you meet people not just in a professional sense, but also just, you know, contractors and others that, you know, that hold memories for you. You know, the other side of all this is that, you know, Greg was showing you some of these buildings. What you see inside them usually is not what you see at the end. I mean, I don't know how many buildings we've been in, especially the one in Bologna, or even the one there in Bedford that we just, you know, fortunately, congratulations, that's not more than about 3 years old. You don't walk into a pristine building. You walk into usually what's a mess. And the best example I can think of, and this goes back to 99, maybe 2000, I was doing something with the, one of the local nonprofits here, and they were looking at 2 buildings on Main Street. One was a bar, and the other one was kind of closed up. I'm not sure what it was at the time. So, go in there with the representative, and he said, oh, well, you know, you go upstairs, there's a 3rd floor as well. And we get on the 2nd floor, it's all storage, you gotta walk around stuff, trying to find your way to get around. So we walk upstairs, and of course, like so many of these buildings, they're completely boarded up. There's no windows, you can't see a thing. So I took my flashlight with me, and got to the top of the stairs, I could smell something that was familiar. And I thought, what is this? So I shined the light up on the ceiling, and I got to about 17, I stopped counting the number of bats that were there. And so I told them, I said, I don't think this is good, we need to leave. But at the same time, the guano that was on the floor was about that deep, so they've been living there for a number of years. Unfortunately, I was not involved in cleaning up that building. So, you know, there's all these little stories that go with all of these buildings. And, you know, again, I just think I've been very fortunate. I think I was prepared to do this. I took on this approach after, you know, I always wanted to be an architect first. Okay? That was back about 12. I'm not going to be too personal like Steve did. But it was always one of those things I was interested in. And it wasn't always that I wanted to do new buildings. I mean, they're great, they're fun, there's a lot of ego you can put into it, but after my first degree in education, which was in secondary education, in history and political science, I knew that I really enjoyed looking at history a lot. And so when I was at Ball State, I was fortunate enough to be able to not only graduate from there, but go back and teach there for 5 years. And during that time, I realized that, man, these college professors have a lot of time on their hands. So I decided to get a master's degree. And when I did, I got an MArch degree, and most of it was with, if not all of it, with professors I was not working with. And it was all in historic preservation and rehab and so forth. So it kind of prepared me for where we were going to go. It was just a matter of time of saying, okay, when am I going to go out and start my own firm? And we got a little push on that. When the firm we were working with, Steve and I, they decided that they were not going to fund us. This is a firm out of Minneapolis, and that we were either going to have to buy the firm or we were going to be on your own. And so it was kind of like, well, I hated to break that up. We had 11 people, a lot of very good, very talented people, interior designers, architects, and so it was kind of like, okay, I think I'm ready to try this. And what it reminded me of, and I'll close very quickly here, I know you're getting bored. What it reminded me of is when I was a kid, we used to go to Oasis swimming pool. And I was always envious of my friends who would be able to go off the high dive. Okay? And it was like, I don't think I can do this. I'm not really sure I can go off this high dive. So first, I had to prove I could swim across the pool. Well, finally achieved that. Went up the steps of the high dive, and I'm looking down like, man, this is a long way. And finally decided, okay, just jump. So it's kind of like that when I went to start my own business. I decided, okay, time is right. Trudeau said I could do it. And so I said, I'm jumping in. We're going to start. And it took a while to get established. But this was probably one of my first major projects, going back to '94. So with that, I'm just going to say thank you all for being here tonight. It brought back some very positive memories, a few negative ones. On top of that, I intend to be around for a while yet. Trudeau, I'm sorry. And I hope to continue. In fact, Greg has got me into 3 projects already. Shows Indiana, French Lick, and then what's the third one?
Austin.
Austin, yes. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, I have to be in Austin. Thank you, Greg. So, thank you all very much.
Hey, Roy,
Thanks, Steve.
if I can get this thing going,
Okay.
get the standing ovation for you there.
What's that? Ron or our speakers? If not, thank you very much to all of our speakers. Thank you, Ron, for all you've done in the community.
Ron,
We have
biggest challenge of everything you've done, what was your biggest challenge?
Oh, wow. Oh, I'm thinking, give me a moment to think about it. Well, the biggest challenge so far has probably been the Wolf Hotel. We're still trying to find someone for that. And I've been out there a number of times with contractors trying to, one, get someone interested in doing the building. So that's probably the most recent. For me, this building was my biggest challenge. As a person working in a firm, I didn't have all the responsibilities that it takes to be an architect in this area. And so with Sally's constant pushing, like, Ron, you can do this, not a problem. And so I did, but I did have help. I mean, as I said, we were part of a team. And firm I worked with in Louisville, I kept good, I didn't burn any bridges, and they acted as consultants and helped us get through this. K. Norman Berry Associates is the main one. So that was one of the biggest ones. Actually, I don't know too many, they're all challenges. You're always rewinding, you're always starting over. It's not like you can build from one to the other. You start over on every project and try to just understand what the issues are. And I think Greg's building up in Bedford was another one. Well, looking at that wall and then trying to realize how we're going to do this. So thanks, Jerry. That's a very, very good one.
If you were going to complete the sentence, something I would do differently is,
I'd started my own business earlier, without a doubt. But no, I think I needed the confidence that working with the other firms did. I mean, again, it's really strange how these things work out. We were coming back to New Albany in '85, and I'd set resumes out and really did not get a whole lot of responses. And there was a weekend that we came down to see Trudeau's parents and her grandmother, and I looked in the paper, and here was an architectural firm advertising for a project architect, that this was K. Norman Berry Associates in Louisville. And I said, well, I sent them a resume. So I called the firm on Monday, and by Friday I had a job, which, it's kind of like just serendipity. I just never know what's going to happen. So there's some challenges out there. I don't want to anymore, but it's been fun. I mean, I don't think Trudeau feels that way at times, but, and she's the one that kept saying, you've got to start saying no.
Ron, what are you into?
What?
Like today?
Today?
What's your projects?
Well, I have clients here